What's your creative process like to help develop a story? For example, your children's books, developing the characters, the background.
It's funny too. It's probably not that dissimilar from you when you're trying to figure out what's the story I'm going to tell a jury. I deal with stories in any type of dispute, right? Or any type of negotiation. It's like, hey, what's our story? What's their story? What are they trying to sell to us? What are we trying to sell to them, right? It's very similar, except, the children's books actually come from stories I told my kids, just trying to get them to go to bed at night. Like, it was just like, I'm just trying to make my kids laugh because my wife's in the other room with our youngest, because we have 4 kids. Right. So it's like, it's just crazy. It's crazy when you have young kids. To me, it starts with this idea that I would have that I thought, like, for me, it was poking fun at fairy tales. Like, my daughters love these princess fairy tales. And so I thought, well, wait, do you know the true story? Or do you understand? And it would be just trying to make them laugh. Once I determined to share those stories with the world, because initially it was like, no one's going to know about these. These are just our personal stories because they're a little silly.
Welcome to Harry Handles It, a podcast where we dive into the world of personal growth, success strategies, and everything in between. I'm your host, Harry Nalbandyan, and today we're going to chat with an incredible guest who has some amazing insights to share. Remember, no matter what life throws your way, I'm here to help you handle it. So let's get started.
Good morning. We got John Mashni here, who is an attorney, a producer, and an author. Welcome, John. How you doing?
Hey, Harry. Great to be here. Very nice to get a chance to chat with you.
Can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and kind of the hats you wear?
Yeah. So I'm an attorney, practicing attorney, business, tax, and IP, intellectual property are kind of the big areas. But I deal a lot with entrepreneurs and business owners mainly. Sometimes serve as like outside general counsel for clients, just helping them direct traffic from a legal perspective. So deal with all sorts of different issues, whether it's employment, real estate, buying and selling businesses, contracts, certainly intellectual property, and certainly basically anything that can happen in a business. Married, have 4 kids, actually write children's books with my kids. So that's very, very fun. Comes from my entertainment background or storytelling background, and went to film school many, many years ago. So that never really left me, that desire to tell stories or the fun that comes from telling stories. And I do a lot in the entertainment space too. So work on some different film productions, from a legal standpoint, but also producing standpoint, and even acting. They throw me into the films sometimes. So very, very fun, very crazy though.
That's incredible. One thing I want to do a little deep dive into is your storytelling experience and background. As somebody who tries cases in front of juries, all we do is tell stories to jurors and hope that the story resonates with them. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think, I really love storytelling and stories. I grew up kind of always loving movies. I came from a family where my mom loved movies. So her favorite thing was just sit down and watch a movie. Same thing, like grandparents, like my grandfather loved all his, 1930s, 40s horror movies and Dracula and all this stuff. And I grew up with that and grew up watching Star Wars and all those kinds of things. And really, it loved that idea of the story that just captures you, that you can't stop watching. And I did some acting and some singing and stuff like that in high school and college. And then at one point I was really just like, hey, I felt this calling to just go and study it somehow. And that's what prompted me, what year was it? The year 2000, said, hey, I'm going to go live in New York for a little bit and go to film school. And it taught me a ton. It really did. I learned so much. And if anything, I learned, like, it wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted, that I saw there, where people were just all in on their specific film. And it just wasn't for me, like, from the lifestyle perspective. But I left there thinking, like, I just still love telling stories. So I wrote a couple screenplays in my 20s and was really trying to think about how I could tell stories. I started doing marketing, started doing, videos for companies, like corporate videos and things like that, and worked on some different film sets. So I really just always loved it. I just was maybe confused about, how do I incorporate this into my life? And it started off as like marketing. And then, after I went to law school, I never intended to do anything entertainment related. I was all about business and helping entrepreneurs. But one of my old film buddies called me and just said, hey, John, I have a movie. I'm trying to get it made, and I really don't like attorneys, but I like you. So can you help me with this movie? And I was like, of course, right? Is this first year attorney out of law school? Okay, yeah, sure. And that's what really started it. So I helped him with his film, I helped, and then that led to kind of a referral, like help sell a TV show, which was really fun, also crazy. And then that just led to so many other things, other filmmakers, other artists, authors, musicians, and getting involved with different like record labels and just tons of stuff. And I was always a writer myself. So I was writing online and doing things and telling stories and in that world. And it just kind of extended into now that I feel like that's a big part of what I do in so many different areas.
What's your creative process like to help develop a story? For example, your children's books.
Yeah, that's great. And
Developing the characters, the background.
It's funny too. It's probably not that dissimilar from you when you're trying to figure out what's the story I'm going to tell a jury, or even, I deal with stories in any type of dispute, right? Or any type of negotiation. It's like, hey, what's our story? What's their story? What are they trying to sell to us? What are we trying to sell to them, right? It's very similar, except, the children's books actually come from stories I told my kids, just trying to get them to go to bed at night. Like, it was just like, I'm just trying to make my kids laugh because my wife's in the other room with our youngest, because we have 4 kids, right? So it was like she always had the youngest kid, and then I was like, okay, here I am with my son, and then my son and daughter, and then my son and 2 daughters, and then it's just crazy. It's crazy when you have young kids. To me, it starts with this idea that I would have, that I thought, like, for me, it was poking fun at fairy tales. Like, my daughters love these princess fairy tales, and so I thought, well, wait, do you know the true story? Or do you understand? And it would be just trying to make them laugh. And once I determined to share those stories with the world, because initially it was like, no one's going to know about these. These are just our personal stories, because they're a little silly, and I don't even know how much you know about them. But the first one is Cinderella, except, when the clock strikes midnight, she's leaving the ball, and then she, loses her slipper. Everyone knows this part of it. But I told my kids, no, the real story is she picks up the slipper, she bends over, and she actually toots. And then she takes her slipper away, and all the prince has is not the slipper, it's the smell of her toot. And so it's called Cinder Toot. The prince has to go around and ask all the maidens to pass gas, essentially, to find up. And I initially was never going to tell this story to anyone outside of my children. But my kids told people, and that led to people saying, you should really publish this. Like, this is a good idea. It would be fun. And I thought, you're crazy. My clients will fire me. My firm will fire me. Everybody's going to fire me. It just was like, this was a bad idea. But what I realized was the story itself was very fun and made people laugh. And that's what was exciting about it. And the components, like, how do you do it? It really comes down to take my idea and just get a first draft done. Just get a first draft. And then use the team that I had assembled to then take that first draft and turn it into something that becomes polished and professional. So even for me, and you probably know this, when you're working on a case, it's not just your idea. It's like, hey, I get my proposal, or I get my idea or my first draft, and then I go to the people that around me. Like, for me, it was an editor. I have a book editor for children's books, and she's fantastic. Her name's Brooke, and she's phenomenal. But I get the first draft, and then I give it to her. And it's because I trust her. She has edited books, I think, for Disney Publishing for years or for decades, very long time. So I felt like my role as the storyteller is get the first draft done and then give it to the rest of the team to do their part. And then once the editor gets it done, then I take it to the illustrator, the person that does the art. Because I'm not the person that's going to do the pictures. But it's just step by step. Once one kind of expert or team member gets it, that they do their part, and then I take it and hand it to the next person. And that's the process, in a very short version. I'm curious, like, is that similar how you operate in the personal injury space?
It's almost exactly the same. So,
yeah.
Some of the stories given to us, because of our client's life, what they've gone through, the accident, the injuries, we have some framework of the story. But when it comes to how these injuries have affected them, what changes in their life, that's when you have to really sit down, talk to the person, get that first draft, get that draft over to other team members. Whether sometimes we develop animations to show how a certain series of events could have caused an injury, for example, a brain injury. So sometimes it's not patently obvious, like somebody slipping and falling at a grocery store, hitting their head on a shopping cart, how physically that could cause a brain injury. But we developed the animation, like the illustrator you mentioned, to help show that process. And I don't do that. But again,
That's right.
it's taking that first draft and giving it to the team members. So that's a pretty good perspective. It's almost the same.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, Harry, just to add to that, this process, when I thought of how to create something, it's the exact process that I advise entrepreneurs when you're building a business. Figure out, hey, what is the piece that you can do that you're really good at? Let's figure that out. And then all the stuff that then let's figure out all the stuff that needs to get done that is not that piece. And then let's go get a team to do all the stuff that you can't do, whether they're, employees, whether they're contractors, whether they're vendors. Whether, a lawyer, right? An accountant, banker, insurance agent, whatever else you need based on your business. Figure out what you can do. And it's the same thing. Get that first draft, whatever that is, and then hand it off to the team. And that's the same advice that you would tell like an entrepreneur or a business owner. It's the same thing. It's just different context, which to me is exciting because it's like we're creating something from nothing. And that is it. That is the key. If you don't do that, to me, what ends up happening is you'll burn out. Like I'm sure in your case, if you tried to do every part of your legal process, you couldn't do it, right?
There's no way. I mean, we have a team of 80 plus people here to service all our clients, and it's impossible for one person to do everything. And that's something that I have to explain to my clients sometimes. Like, hey, we hired Harry. Yes, you did hire Harry, but you also hired Harry plus. And we got this entire army behind us who's working to make sure that all of the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
And that's how, to me, this is how you be successful. It's the same thing, right? It's the same process. It's just you might do it on a smaller scale. Like I said, with a children's book, it's the same thing for multi-million-dollar business. Same thing, right? Get the team. And if you don't have a team, I think you're in trouble anyway. But get the team involved and then figure out how do I step away? Like, hey, this isn't it's not my expertise, right? I'm good at a lot of stuff, but I'm not going to be good at every single thing.
Let me ask you this. What was your process like of letting go? Because I know that as an entrepreneur myself and talking to other entrepreneurs, some people have a hard time with letting go and delegating to their team because nobody can do it as better than I can, which is not true. But how do you deal with that problem?
Yeah, it's certainly not true. We always think we're like the best at everything, but we're not, right? I'll just go back to the children's books and then, we could take it to other areas too. But one of the hardest things for me was hiring an editor for a children's book, because these are normally short books. You think about it. My books are probably a little bit longer, like 1,000 words though. 1,000 words. Do I need an editor to edit 1,000 words? So I have reviewed a publishing contract for a children's book. That was my first exposure to the legal world of children's books. And it was like a 15 or 20 page contract, right? Just like a normal publishing contract. But then it said the entire book was listed as Exhibit A, the entire book. And so I was like, oh, I want to read it. Let me go look at the back of the contract and read the book. And you know what? It was 100 words. It was on one sheet of paper. And it blew my mind, because I was like, this is the whole book and this guy's getting this deal. And do you know what I mean? It's like this realization of 15 or 20 page contract and the entire book is on one sheet of paper. And I honestly, Harry, I read it. I laughed out loud. It was funny. It had some good humor, but it was one or two jokes, right? It was kind of like the one punchline and then a couple other laughs. And it shocked me that was all that was there. Very short. So going back to your question, the hardest thing for me was I did the first draft and I thought it was perfect. I thought it was really good. But someone I care about said, John, because she had actually written a bunch of children's books. So she's like, John, trust me, hire an editor. And I did not want to. I'd why do I need to? I'll just go right to illustrations. And once the editor did the first pass, I realized why. And here's an example. My story started, my version, the first draft, I summarized the whole Cinderella story for 3 pages. 3 pages. And my editor came back and said, John, you know, every single person reading your book already knows the story of Cinderella, right? And I was like, yeah, but I just felt like we had to like retell it, to like tell it my way, you know? And it's like, no, John, everybody already knows this. They're going to be so bored 3 pages into your book. It's not going to be, you know, you're going to lose people. And that's an example of, I had to be, I think, comfortable enough, humble enough to say, one, my way is not the best way, right? And two, even though I was attached to it, because that was my version of the story I told my kids, it's not the best version that's going to go out into the world, right? And affect people. And she was right. So I literally cut the first, I mean, it was a lot. I cut a lot because I thought it'd be fun, even with the illustrations and stuff like that. No. So literally it starts with the clock strikes midnight. And that to me is an example of so many things. Like, you know, you have a story that you're excited about, and even honestly, a contract or an agreement or a project I'm excited about. A lot of times I have to be very diligent about, is this what's best for the client? Is this what's best for the team? Is this what's best for, right, the audience? Same thing. You're saying like, hey, I bet you can even imagine, do you got to summarize all that stuff for the jury? They already know this. Let's cut to the part that they don't know and go right there immediately. So anyway, it's just interesting to me. Like that was one of the things I learned is like, I did my brain dump and that's the first draft. Then and I don't have to do everything the team says. You know, I overrode my editor on a couple big things in a few of the books, but those were because, like I told her, I only wrote the book so I could include this scene in here. So if the scene isn't in here, I'm not even publishing this book. But other than those few things, really, I was very sensitive and I took it as like, this is really good feedback. And that was really important to me.
That's incredible. Some people have a hard time with that, right? It's their idea. It's their baby. Nobody knows it better than us. So they have a hard time with letting go.
Yes. And it is hard. And like, I think, and I'm curious how you do this too. Like, you almost have to listen more intently, right? So like, sometimes they're right. Like 95% of the time they're right. They catch it, but they don't know internally maybe something that you know, right? They don't know everything. They don't know. You might say, because I could think about someone, you might say, well, you need to tell this part of the story. And it's like, no, I actually do need to tell this part of the story with this witness or whatever, because it helps me, you know, for 4 steps later, but you don't know about that. So that's where you got to be careful, because it's not like they're always right. It's like, you just have to learn that discernment. And that's what I think people like you bring, and myself too, but like we bring, that's the artistic part of what we do. Like, we know, like, no, I feel like this is very important. Even though everyone's telling me no, I think that's what gives the value that you bring. And hopefully I bring too, of like, no, this, I understand all what you're saying. This though is important.
I mean, big time. As a trial lawyer trying cases, I feel like you're a director, you're a producer, you're part of the play.
Yeah.
You're wearing a lot of hats. You're a writer sometimes, in the moment too. So,
and you're the instrument too. You're the actor, right? Because you're not. So you're directing everything. You're setting the story. The plot is unraveling, but you're also center stage too, right? Of just like, hey, it's you telling the story. They're judging. I mean, I think it's fascinating stuff. I don't go to court, Harry. I try to stay. I'm actually undefeated in court. I think, the motion was unopposed, but no, I think that's really interesting about, what you do, is that there is that, it's like all encompassing. Like, you have to, it is an art for sure, I think. Right. But there is this sense of, you have multiple roles, and obviously you can't do everything yourself, but you personally have this, like, very, very important. It's this vital role that you are filling, and you're wearing these multiple hats. Very fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's honestly a beautiful thing, and it's hard to appreciate unless you are a juror and you've sat through the entire process. I mean, look, nobody likes jury duty. Nobody. In the juries I've picked, nobody's wanting to be there. But every single time after the case is over, after they've rendered their verdict, after they've talked about it, every one of them comes up to me and says, wow, what an experience this was, to be able to make a difference, or not, in somebody's life. But it was fulfilling, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the people do have the power in this country, which is wild. And it's something that we all take for granted. Me too. And then it's those moments in closing argument when I'm talking to the jurors afterwards where it's like, wow, we really do have a special system here, and a system for people like me who enjoy being in it. It's incredible. And for people who benefit from it, it's incredible. And for corporations and governments who are held accountable because of it, also incredible. Really the only place that it happens in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested too. How do you look at authenticity when you're in these positions and you're telling the story? Because I think one of the things I find very fascinating is in this age that we're in with social media, we're recording something together, we're having this conversation. Even when we're like, I'm in a position as an attorney where I have to present a client's position, there are elements to me of, I feel like many times people are trying to be deceptive, and then other people are trying to be authentic, right? And part of it is like, how do you be authentic in this, for lack of a better way to say it, just the storytelling that we're both engaging in?
So authenticity is 100% part of being a trial lawyer. So my philosophy for trying cases is you've got to be 100% truth seeker and truth teller. So anything bad with the case, any wrinkles, I'm the first one to talk about it. It's, as a plaintiff's lawyer, as the person that's bringing the case to court, really all eyes are on you, since you're the one that's suing, you're the one that brought the action.
Yeah.
The jurors are really looking at you skeptically too, for good reason. So when it comes to this question of authenticity, I just try to be myself 100% of the time. I don't try to sugarcoat things. I give the bad facts right away. And it's all about where it lands. I mean, you could be the greatest orator, you could be the greatest trial lawyer in the world, you can be the greatest whatever. But if you have a group of 12 people who are not even receptive, even a little bit, to the idea of the justice that you're seeking, I mean, you're doomed from the get-go.
Right.
So, I mean, being authentic and being real is 100% part of the game. I think people see it through you if you're not, especially 12 people sitting in a box who have no fight, who have no, they have no skin in the game. So they're just there looking, observing, watching every moment. So I think authenticity is 100% part of it.
Yeah, that's to me, that's what makes stories more powerful, right? And like you said, you acknowledge the weaknesses, but still, like most of the time, the authenticity of the person telling the story is going to affect people. It's going to impact people.
I mean, there's that famous saying, it's not what you say to people, it's how you make them feel. And that's what they're going to remember for a long time.
Yeah.
And so if you, as the storyteller, just with your words and the way you speak them, can bring about this emotion into people, like reading children's books to kids. How incredible is it that you can take just by reading some words, you can take somebody who is defiant, doesn't want to go to bed, make them laugh, put them in a different emotional state for them to be receptive to what you're saying.
Well, I'll tell you this story. It's kind of a fun story, but I think it relates exactly to what you're saying. One day, this is early on in my first books. I have 4 books out. They're not all, flatulence related, but one day I was very nervous about sharing because, like I said, I'm a practicing lawyer. At the time, I was working at a 100-person firm. I literally thought my firm was going to fire me for publishing this book. I thought, do I need a pen name? Like, that's where I was at. Like, do I publish it under my real name? But I did the first draft, and I I went through all the editing with the editor, and I got a version that I thought was really good. Like I liked it. I laughed myself when I read it. So I sent it to my best friend. He's got 5 kids. And I said, you're literally the first person outside my family and the editor to read this book. And there's no pictures. So it's just the manuscript. I said, will you just read it to your kids and be honest with me? Just be honest. I'm a little embarrassed. I'm struggling. Like, can you just tell me what you think? Like, truly, like, read it to your kids, right? And it was just me being so sensitive to, hey, I'm about to publish a children's book, and I'm a business attorney. I'm just making, I'm doing a deal worth $20 million, and then now I'm deciding which word to use to make a kid laugh. Like, it's just this weird dichotomy. So I emailed it to him, and he was like, yeah, I'll read it to the kids. And a couple of nights later, I just got this email back, and I still remember this so clearly. and I saved the email. Like, John read the book to the kids. He made a joke about his wife was like, John wrote this. John Mashni wrote this. Are you serious? But he said, the kids laughed so hard. Thank you for giving me 30 minutes of laughter with my children.
I just got goosebumps, man. That's beautiful.
And so I think that gets to what you're saying is it's not about telling the story. It's about the outcome. It's about the feeling. And so when I was talking to my kids, because I write these books with my kids, if I wasn't doing it with the kids, I would not be doing it. Okay. To be honest with you, Harry, there's probably better ways to make money and do stuff. Right. But here I was having a conversation with my kids and I said, what do we actually sell, guys? What do we sell? And they're like, we sell books, Dad. And I said, well, no, we do not sell books. We sell about 30 minutes of laughter with a child. And sometimes the child's optional. Right. And I think they got it because that's the attitude I have. I'm not, and I think this could apply to anything, right? What are you selling somebody to represent you? Yeah, of course you're selling representation. But you're actually selling something else, right? You're selling an outcome. You're selling the emotion. You're selling the feeling that they get when they get some form of justice, right, for what happened to them. And I think, to me, that story for me, like, what am I selling? I think it's so important to remember in any business. Hey, what am I actually selling? Because it's not what I think. Like, for me, as an IP lawyer, a business lawyer, I'm not selling a trademark registration or a contract, right? I guess I am, but like, no, they what they really want is the peace of mind, knowing that a probably a really good attorney is doing this for them, and they feel like they're protecting their business, or they're representing their business well, or they're right. Like, they feel peace, they feel comfort, they feel security. And like, I think it's probably similar in what you do, right? I mean, I'm curious how you resonate with that.
Big time. I mean, the reason this job is hard and it's not for everybody, but for me, the work that I do with my clients, it gives me purpose, because at the end of the day, I truly know through experiences we've had growing up what it feels like to lose somebody and not have that kind of closure, or be permanently injured and not have the kind of closure, or somebody that's willing to step up and fight for you. Yeah. I mean, is what I'm selling, is the promise of a hell of a fight. And most of the time, 99% of the time, 98% of the time, that outcome means a fantastic, just result for the clients. But what I'm selling is the relentless pursuit of justice on behalf of my clients, to give them the peace of mind, saying, look, I'm doing this for you. You just focus on getting better. That's all I want you to do. I've got everything else. And that's the experience we try to sell to our clients, because most of the time it's the worst part, the shittiest part of their life is when they call us.
Yeah.
And then we try to hold their hand and rebuild from there.
Well, I think too, that's awesome to me, is understanding like what's the value that you're actually creating. And I think, just to link it to the children's books, for me, the world is a tough place, man. It just is, right? And you could say, practicing law is tough, 1,000% it's tough, right? You're dealing with people, even on my end, when sometimes like everything I do is not disputes, but a lot of times there's people fighting about stuff. But just, you add up professional problems, personal problems, health problems, family problems, political, people are always scared about something politically. So it's like, to me, there's an element of a good story is part of a business, is actually what captures us, because we're all looking for the way out, right? We're all looking for the hero to come in, right? And like, for me, it's, hey, the world needs a little more joy. Let's make people laugh. And like, that's the truth, right? Like, hey, the world is depressing enough. I published my first book during COVID. Nice. And I had the manuscript done, and I was going to hire an illustrator. And then that was March 2020. And I put it down and I was like, this is not the time. It's very serious. But about middle of April 2020, right during COVID, and everybody, I think there was still lots of uncertainty. It was about midnight. I remember it was a Wednesday night at midnight, and I saw my printed book, like the fully edited version. And I saw it just sitting on a counter. I was like, well, let me just read it. No, everyone in my house was asleep. And I picked it up and I read it, and I hadn't read it in probably a month and a half. So I was pretty separated from the last time I read. So I didn't have it fresh in my memory. And it's midnight, and I was just laughing out loud to myself at my own story, right? I was like, this is hilarious. And it taught me something though. This is what the world needs. We got through it. We were going through this. Everybody's uncertain. Everybody's worried. Everybody has anxiety and lots of fear and all this kind of stuff. And I just said, you know what we need right now? We got to laugh a little bit. We need some joy. We need some fun. So that's what actually prompted me to start telling the stories publicly, because I was worried. And I think that's interesting to me to hear you talk about what it does. It's like, that's what a good story does. It pulls you out of whatever mess you're in, whatever pain you have, whatever you might feel like, hey, I can't go forward another day. And it's like, oh no, it doesn't have to be that way. And that's so interesting to me, right? Like that, that's why I love stories.
I think that is a beautiful story, because I do remember that time, the uncertainty, everybody was super serious. Stay away from me. We don't know what's going on. There's a giant death counter on every channel that you put on. So thank you for doing your part and making it a little bit lighter during that time. For me, that's one of my favorite form of art is stand-up comedy. And that's what I love about it. It's like, no matter what is going on, if you tune into a nice 30-minute, 40-minute special, it takes you out of that space and puts you into a completely different space. You get some good belly laughs in and get the endorphins flowing. And it's beautiful what human beings with words can do.
And it's just, I love the art of stand-up comedy too. In fact, we probably could do a whole podcast on that. But I think you're exactly right. They just go up by themselves, nobody else to interact with other than this audience, and just start talking. And my favorite ones are the storytellers.
Yes.
That weave it into a story. And they're funny. It's certainly funny, but it's, I do like the rapid jokes, like a Rodney Dangerfield or something like that. But the ones that I love are like a Nate Bargatze or like a Sebastian Maniscalco, or some of the ones who are just telling stories and you're just cracking up because it's so hilarious.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. This was a fantastic conversation, John. Thank you very much. Can you tell our listeners how they can find you? And just give them a refresher again what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a transactional attorney, business tax and intellectual property. Work tons with startups and entertainers, creative people and entrepreneurs and business owners. And you could reach me at johnmashni.com, just my name.com. You can find out the legal side, the writing side, the books, blog, articles, a whole bunch of other stuff. That's the best way to reach out and find me.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time again, John. And I look forward to having you on again. This was a great conversation.
Thanks, Harry. My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us today on Harry Handles It. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and found some valuable takeaways. If you're facing challenges in your own life or business, remember that you're not alone. Together, we can handle anything that comes our way. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you liked what you heard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and handling life with confidence.